You know those moments when your client logs into the session and before they even say a word, you can see it in their face? They're carrying it. That heavy, "I'm stuck and I hate it" energy. They might say, "I've been thinking about this all week," or "I don't even know where to start." And as a coach, you can feel they've been circling the same problem over and over, and now it's starting to feel impossible to them. Here's the good news. You don't need weeks or months to get them moving again. In fact, with the right approach, you can help a stuck client get clarity, choose a direction, and commit to action in a single conversation. That's what this video is all about. We're going to go step by step through a process you can use in real time with your clients, no matter what they're stuck on: career decisions, personal goals, relationships, you name it. By the end, you'll have a simple framework you can lean on whenever you feel that stuck energy in the room. And this isn't just theory. These steps come straight from my work with hundreds of clients and from the Life Coach's Ultimate Toolkit, which has over 30 proven coaching tools ready to drop into your sessions. I'll link it below so you can check it out later. But for now, let's focus on giving you something you can use right away. So grab your notebook, because if you've ever wondered, how do I help a client get out of their own head and into action, this is going to give you the answer. Step 1. Name the stuck point. One of the biggest reasons clients stay stuck is because they've never actually named what they're stuck on. Sounds simple, right? But here's what usually happens. They come into the session talking about how they feel. "I'm overwhelmed. I'm frustrated. I'm spinning my wheels." Those feelings are valid, but they're not a problem you can solve. When the problem is just a vague cloud of frustration, there's nothing concrete to work on. Your first job is to help them pinpoint exactly what they feel blocked on, so you can focus the session on something real and specific. I often say to my clients, let's zoom in. If you could point to the exact moment where things feel stuck, what's happening there? Or, if we could only solve one piece of this today, what would make the biggest difference? What this does is take them from a swirl of emotions into a place of clarity, because naming the stuck point turns the problem into something with edges. Let me give you a quick example. I had a client who came in saying she was overwhelmed with her business. She kept repeating, "There's too much to do." But when we slowed down and got specific, we discovered her real stuck point wasn't too much work. It was one decision whether or not to hire a virtual assistant. Everything else was just noise building up around that single choice. Once we named it, the session suddenly had a clear target. Now, you might be wondering, why does this naming step matter so much? Psychologically, it's because our brains can't solve what they can't define. There's a part of the brain called the reticular activating system. It's like your brain's filter for what matters. When you name something specific, that system locks on and starts looking for relevant information, patterns, and solutions. Here's a coaching tip. Once they've named the stuck point, repeat it back to them in their own words. So what I'm hearing is, you're stuck on deciding whether to accept this promotion, right? That moment of reflection does two things. It confirms you're both on the same page, and it gives them the relief of knowing the problem is clear and containable. And sometimes, just naming the stuck point already starts to loosen it. I've seen clients breathe out, smile, and say, "Wow, okay, that actually feels smaller now that I've said it." From there, you're ready to move into the next phase, exploring the reality of what's actually going on around this stuck point without judgment. That's where step 2 comes in, and it's one of the most revealing parts of this process. Step 2, explore the reality without judgment. Once your client has named the stuck point, you might feel tempted to jump straight into brainstorming solutions. Don't. It's a bit like diagnosing a patient after they've only told you one symptom. You're going to miss something important if you don't fully understand the landscape of their situation. This step is all about slowing down and gathering the facts, not just the surface facts, but the emotional and behavioral patterns that are holding them in place. I like to tell clients, let's map out the whole picture of what's going on here before we decide what to do next. Here are some of my go-to questions. What have you already tried to move forward on this? Of those things, what's worked, even a little bit? What's made it hard to follow through? Who or what else is involved in this situation? When they answer, listen for clues. Are they running into external roadblocks like lack of resources or time, or internal ones like fear, self-doubt, or perfectionism? Sometimes I'll notice patterns in their language. For example, a client might say, "I can't," when they really mean, "I won't," or they'll keep referring to other people's opinions before mentioning their own. That tells me there's a deeper driver here, like fear of judgment, that we'll need to address. Here's a real example. I worked with a client who said her stuck point was deciding whether to leave her job. When we explored her reality, she listed all the reasons she couldn't quit. She'd lose her income, her team relied on her, she might regret it. But as we talked, I noticed she kept circling back to one thing her parents had always valued: job stability above all else. That value wasn't hers, but she'd been carrying it for years. Naming that influence helped her realize she was living under someone else's definition of security. Why is this exploration step so important? Because without it, you risk treating the symptoms instead of the cause. A client might say they need better time management, when really they're procrastinating because they're afraid of failing. This is also where your coaching presence really matters. Clients can smell judgment from a mile away. If they sense you're thinking, "Well, that was a bad choice," they'll shut down or start defending their actions instead of examining them. So stay in curiosity mode. Even when they tell you something that seems obviously unhelpful, like, "I binge watch Netflix every night to avoid thinking about it," resist the urge to fix it right away. Instead, you might say, "What do you think you're getting from that habit right now?" Often, there's a payoff: comfort, distraction, relief from anxiety that needs to be acknowledged before they're ready to let it go. By the end of this step, you want both you and your client to have a clear, shared understanding of their reality. Not the drama, not the excuses, just the truth of what's happening right now. And here's the best part. Sometimes, this exploration alone can trigger a shift. I've had clients realize mid-conversation that their situation isn't as hopeless as they thought, simply because they've laid it out objectively for the first time. Once you've painted this clear picture, you're ready for step 3, helping them see their situation from a new angle, so they can start to imagine possibilities instead of just barriers. That's where fresh perspective comes in, and it's where the real creativity starts. Step 3, break the pattern with fresh perspective. By now, your client has named exactly where they're stuck, and you've explored their current reality in detail. What's next? You need to help them step out of the mental loop they've been replaying, because staying in the same frame of reference is what keeps them stuck in the first place. Think about it. If their current way of looking at the problem could solve it, they would have already solved it. So in this step, we're intentionally breaking that loop by shifting their perspective. I often tell my clients, sometimes the fastest way forward isn't by pushing harder in the same direction, it's by looking at the problem from a totally different angle. One of my favorite ways to do this comes from the GROW model, which is one of the 30+ frameworks in the life. Coach's Ultimate Toolkit. The O in GROW stands for options, and this is where we get creative and open the door to possibilities. Here are some powerful perspective-shifting questions you can ask. If you couldn't fail, what would you do? If you didn't have to get it perfect, what's the first thing you'd try? If your best friend were in this exact situation, what advice would you give them? Imagine you're looking back at this moment 5 years from now. What do you wish you'd done? Why do these questions work so well? They bypass the brain's risk assessment filter for a moment, which allows the creative problem-solving part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, to take over. Instead of scanning for danger, the brain starts scanning for possibility. Here's an example from my own coaching sessions. I had a client who felt stuck, deciding whether to leave her comfortable corporate job to start her own business. Every time she thought about it, her mind filled with what ifs. What if it doesn't work? What if I can't make enough money? I asked her, if you couldn't fail, what would you do? Without hesitation, she said, "Oh, I'd leave in a heartbeat and start my own consulting firm." That instant answer told us 2 things. First, she already knew what she wanted, and second, her fear of failure was the only real barrier. Sometimes, I like to make this step playful. I'll say, "All right, let's pretend you have a magic wand. What would you change right now?" Or, if we could outsource this decision to your most confident self, what would they choose? Humor and imagination can loosen a client's grip on their limitations. And if the client is still struggling to see beyond their current frame, this is a great time to introduce a visual tool like the Wheel of Life, also in the toolkit. It's amazing how simply mapping out their satisfaction in different life areas can help them realize, oh, the real pressure I'm feeling isn't even from the decision, it's from neglecting my health and relationships while I overfocus on work. That fresh perspective alone can shift priorities and reduce the sense of being stuck. By the end of this step, your client should have a list or at least a handful of potential directions they could explore. They don't need to commit yet. The goal here is just to break the pattern and open the door. Next, in step 4, we'll take those possibilities and shrink them down into something so small and doable that your client can't not take action. This is where theory turns into movement. Step 4. Shrink the next step until it's unavoidable. Here's the truth. Most clients who are stuck aren't actually afraid of taking action. They're afraid of taking a big action and getting it wrong. That's why they procrastinate, overthink, or keep researching without deciding. Their brain is telling them, we can't move until we're sure this is the perfect plan. Your job as a coach is to help them lower the bar, way lower. I often say to my clients, you don't have to take the perfect next step. You just have to take a step you can't talk yourself out of. That means breaking down their potential actions until they're so small, so specific, and so doable that their brain says, well, yeah, I can do that. Let's put this into a concrete example. Say your client's fresh perspective exercise led them to realize they want to start getting fit again. Their first instinct might be, I'll join a gym, go 5 days a week, and totally overhaul my diet. Sounds great for about 48 hours. Then life happens, motivation dips, and suddenly they're stuck again. Instead, we might shrink that next step to, I'll take a 15-minute walk after lunch twice this week. Or even, I'll put my sneakers by the door tonight so I'm ready to walk in the morning. The goal isn't to fix their whole life in one move, it's to create momentum. The same works for business decisions. Let's say a client wants to launch a new program but feels paralyzed about the entire process. The shrunken next step might be, write down 5 possible program names. Draft a bullet list of topics I'd want to include. Email one trusted friend for feedback on the idea. Notice how these are all things they can finish in a short burst of time, and none of them require perfection before starting. From a psychological perspective, this works because it reduces what's called activation energy, the mental resistance to starting something. The smaller the action, the lower that activation energy, which makes follow-through far more likely. Here's a little tip for this step. After the client names their next step, ask them to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10 for how confident they are they can do it this week. If they say anything less than an 8, it's too big. Shrink it again until you get that 8, 9, or 10 confidence score. And don't underestimate the power of giving them permission to take a micro step. Clients often feel pressure to prove to you or themselves that they're making massive moves. Remind them that consistent small steps will always beat giant leaps that never happen. By the end of this step, you should have your client not just thinking about moving forward, but actually believing they can do the thing you've agreed on. That belief is gold. Now, in the final step, step 5, we're going to lock in that belief by tying the action to something far more powerful than logic, their emotions. Step 5, anchor it with emotional buy-in. Here's something I want you to remember. Logic makes plans, but emotion drives action. Your client could have the clearest, simplest next step in the world, but if it doesn't mean something to them, it will fall to the bottom of their to-do list. The second life gets busy. This step is about connecting that small, doable action to a deeper why, one that sparks energy, urgency, or excitement every time they think about it. I like to set this up by saying, let's make sure this step isn't just doable, but worth doing. Then I'll ask questions like, how will it feel to finally get this moving? What will be different for you once this is in motion? When you picture yourself a month from now, after you've taken this step, what's changed? Who else in your life will benefit when you follow through? These questions do 2 things. They get the client emotionally connected to the outcome, and they help them visualize success, which increases the likelihood they'll act. Here's a quick example. I worked with a client who wanted to write the first chapter of her book, but had been stuck for months. We shrunk her next step to write for 20 minutes on Saturday morning. When I asked what it would mean to her to do that, she said, honestly, it would feel like I'm a writer again. Boom, that's the emotional hook. From that moment, it wasn't just about writing, it was about reclaiming part of her identity. You can also help anchor their action by linking it to something they already care about deeply. If their small step is about improving health, tie it to playing with their kids without getting winded. If it's a business step, tie it to the freedom they want in their schedule or the impact they want to make. One advanced tip here, have them say their why out loud in their own words. There's a powerful reinforcement effect when they hear themselves commit verbally. You can even invite them to write it down or put it somewhere they'll see it daily, like a sticky note on their computer or a reminder on their phone. When clients leave your session with a next step that's crystal clear and emotionally anchored, the follow-through rate skyrockets. That's because you've engaged both sides of the brain, the logical side that knows what to do, and the emotional side that fuels the desire to do it. By the time you've gone through all 5 steps, naming the stuck point, exploring reality without judgment, breaking the pattern with fresh perspective, shrinking the next step, and anchoring it with emotional buy-in, you've done more than help them decide what to do. You've shifted their mindset, increased their confidence, and made action almost inevitable. And the best part? This can all happen in one conversation. So, let's step back and look at what you now have in your coaching toolbox. In just one conversation, you can take a client from feeling completely stuck to walking out of the session with clarity, confidence, and a concrete plan. Here's the flow we just covered. Name the stuck point. Get laser specific about what's blocking them so you're not coaching in the fog. Explore the reality without judgment, gather the facts, uncover patterns, and spot the real root cause. Break the pattern with fresh perspective. Use powerful questions to open up new possibilities and loosen old mental loops. Shrink the next step until it's unavoidable. Lower the barrier to action so it's easy to start and hard to avoid. Anchor it with emotional buy-in. Tie the action to a deeper why so their motivation lasts beyond the session. When you put these together, you're not just helping your client solve a problem, you're showing them they can move forward, even when they feel stuck. That's a skill they'll carry with them long after your session ends. Now, here's something I want you to remember. You don't have to reinvent the wheel every time you're faced with a stuck client. The most effective coaches have a set of proven tools they can rely on, processes they know will work in different situations, with different personalities, and on different challenges. That's exactly why I created the Life Coach's Ultimate Toolkit. Inside, you'll find over 30 ready-to-use frameworks, worksheets, and conversation guides like the Grow Model, the Wheel of Life, and Reframing Negative Experiences, each with step-by-step instructions and sample coaching prompts. These aren't just ideas, they're plug-and-play tools you can use in your very next session. Imagine knowing that no matter what a client brings to the table, you've got the perfect tool to help them move forward. That confidence changes everything for you and for them. So here's your challenge for this week. Try this 5-step process with a client who feels stuck. Notice how it changes the energy in the room and how much lighter they feel when they leave. And if you want a whole library of tools just like this one, click the link in the description and grab your copy of the Life Coach's Ultimate Toolkit today. If you found this helpful, give this video a like, hit subscribe for more coaching tools and strategies, and let me know in the comments, which step are you most excited to try in your next session? Thanks for watching. And remember, you don't need every answer to be a great coach. You just need the right questions, the right tools, and the courage to use them. Now you've got one more way to help your clients break free and move forward, sometimes in less than an hour.